De commencer, pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, mon nom est Pierre Portevin, je suis un life coach et coach de dirigeants. J'ai une vraie passion pour tout ce qui fait en sorte qu'on puisse vivre bien, heureux, épanoui et d'une manière qui fasse du bien au monde. Et j'ai écrit 2 livres, l'un sur l'amitié avec soi, mon meilleur ami c'est moi, paru chez Erol, et l'autre qui s'appelle Oser, ça change tout, qui est sous-titré L'art et la science de vivre mieux, ou plus exactement ce que la science nous apprend pour une vie pleine de sens. What science told us about a life full of meaning. J'organise aussi une université d'été. Nous sommes 7 à l'organiser. Je ne suis que co-organisateur de cette initiative qui s'appelle Transmutation, une université pour dirigeants qui a lieu lundi prochain, et avec environ 200 personnes qui sont des influenceurs de notre vie ici en Belgique. Et puis, je suis vraiment heureux. I'm really happy to welcome you, Nick, on this meeting, this encounter. I don't know how to say it exactly in English. And we will cover a topic that really touched me a lot, because watching what science and art and philosophy can learn us about living a good life, I think Ikigai can learn us a lot. And maybe before we start, but it will be part of the conversation, we'll see that Ikigai is not what people usually think in Western countries, and you will explain us what is Ikigai exactly. Well, no, you will explain us that we cannot explain what Ikigai is exactly because it's a blurred character. So you are from Australia. You are in Australia right now, but you are very familiar with Japanese culture. You speak Japanese. So bonjour, cher Nick.
Thank you. Bonjour, Timur. Was that right? Hi, gozaimasu. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Pierre, for having me on this special webinar. It's an absolute joy. And I wish I could speak French. It sounds so lovely and expressive.
Yeah. So I met you via the internet, and we connected via LinkedIn. And I was really touched by everything you do to help us understand what Ikigai is. And you have a beautiful set of podcasts. You are inviting plenty of beautiful guests, people who are scientists, some philosophers, some art people, and just to help us understand Ikigai. And so it's not this stuff with circle, and but how do can you tell us a couple of words about yourself, explaining perhaps also why you are here?
Sure. Well, I'm Nick. My full name is Nicholas. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm a father of one teenage boy, and I'm actually married to a wonderful Japanese woman. But I think from a very young age, I was fascinated with Japan. And my father was a physicist, and he was required to go to Japan to share his research in 1977. And he took the whole family, and I would have been 5. So my first experience of Japan was when I was 5, and I do have some memories of that trip, and it must have left a lasting impression, because I went back to Japan in my early to mid 20s, and fell in love with the culture. On that occasion, I was becoming a trainee chef, so I was learning how to cook at a Japanese restaurant. And this company wanted, wanted to open a chain of restaurants in Melbourne, but that didn't happen, and I didn't want to work in hospitality. So I went back to Japan to teach, and really started learning about the language and the culture, and then fell in love with a Japanese girl, and kept on moving back and forth to Melbourne and Japan. but Japan's had a big impact on my life, and this word ikigai, which we'll talk about tonight, had this big impact. And I actually learnt the word back in 1998. I was back in Japan teaching English. I was quite young and ambitious, and having lunch with my co-workers, my Japanese co-workers, sort of showing off my Japanese. And one co-worker asked me, "Oh, Nick, what's your ikigai?" And I'm like, "Oh, ikigai, what's that?" And she explained it as the reasons why you live and battle on through life. And I found it fascinating that they could encapsulate a life philosophy in one word. And yeah, sort of 20 years later, I guess, I saw what most of you have seen, a Venn diagram, sort of trying to define ikigai. And that has a really interesting story behind that, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah. So you're in love with Japan, in love with the Japanese culture and language. You speak Japanese. You can read Japanese. You write Japanese, maybe?
Not right anymore. I probably type now, but I used to write. It's still learning, so it's never ending. It's a challenging language, because if you do stop, you do forget words, you do forget how to read. It's actually, Ikigai got me back into reading, and it's a real challenge actually to read, but that's the joy of learning.
Yeah. One of the reasons I contacted you is because in my professional career as a coach, life coach, I've been taught to help people find their life mission. And I thought it was not a good idea, because many people are still searching. I cannot find my own life mission, and they are stressing about that. So I was working with a totally different concept called life intentions, with a S at the end, because we have several intentions in ourselves. And I found some bridges between what I was doing and what you were learning. But to help us understand what Ikigai is, perhaps you can explain us what the word means, because I've been following several of your conferences and workshops, and it really helped me understand something.
Sure. So basically, Ikigai is from two words. So we have the verb ikiru, which means to live, and that verb is used more in a sort of a daily life context. And then gai, we could think of gai as a suffix, and gai has several meanings, but it generally means worth or value. And so when you compound them, ikiru and gai, you have ikigai. And I guess if we were to define it, it's the value of living, or the value in living, but it really would mean the spectrum of your life experiences, including the past and the present, and this idea that your life is moving towards a bright future, or a brighter future. So it's not one thing, it's all the things in your life, small or big, roles, relationships, hobbies, aspects of your work, that make your daily life worth living. And that's sort of the important thing, your daily life. But tied to it is this sense of purpose, having a sense of purpose. And again, both in the small things, and if you are pursuing life-defining goals, or if you do have a personal mission, also finding a sense of purpose. And then I guess a few more things. So Japanese approach this word very casually, and there are other Japanese verbs that have gai. So another example is the verb for work in Japanese is hataraku, which means to work your job. And so if you combine that with gai, it becomes hataraki gai. And again, it has that meaning of the value in work or doing worthwhile work. And there's many other, there's asobi gai, there's manabi gai, so this gives us some context that Japanese approach this word quite casually, even though it has this deep meaning. But many Japanese words are like that. I'm sure some of you know wabi-sabi, or maybe you know something like yutori. Yutori is another amazing word, which it means space or room, but it has all these applications to your mental health, to your physical space, to your financial space, to your space in relationships. So, and one more thing I will add is the mother of Ikigai, Kamiya Miyako, and she kept a diary, and she's famous for writing this book. And it's a seminal work, and it's really is probably the Ikigai Bible. That's what my friend, Professor Hasegawa, calls it. She had a distinction. So with Ikigai, you have these Ikigai objects or Ikigai sources. So that could be your partner, it could be your children, it could be one of your hobbies. And so that's an Ikigai object. And then related to that object are your feelings, which we define as Ikigai kann. And so the example Kamiya uses in her book is a child. So if your child is your Ikigai object, you'd have feelings of love, obviously, joy. You might have a sense of purpose as a parent. You might have this optimism and hope for the future. And you'd have, the feeling of connection. And so Ikigai kann, the feelings, these are the most authentic things. And this is what we want to experience. We want to experience these feelings associated to these objects. So that's a lot to take in, but that's the best I can do.
Yeah, well, it's really clear. And you mentioned to me that Miko Kamiya was speaking French and English and several ancient languages such as Greek. So she had a very wide culture. And I saw that she translated Viktor Frankl's book, The Meaning of Life. So she's really precious. And Ikigai Neat Sweet, how do you say that? Ikigai Neat Sweet, her book?
Sorry, Neat Suite. So
Neat Sweet.
Suite means about or regarding. So it's about Ikigai or regarding, but maybe it's something like on the subject of Ikigai, or on the subject, maybe on the meaning of life might be a better translation.
Yeah. And so that book was not translated into English or any language, unfortunately.
Only in Japanese. But yeah, you're right. She lived in Geneva as a teenager and learned French. She became a linguist. She also actually translated Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Became a doctor. Became a professor.
And you also mentioned that part of that book is about something positive psychology would discover way later. So
yeah, I think she was way ahead of her time. And there's a lot of content that talks about what we might associate with positive psychology. So things like life satisfaction, having a sense of freedom, resonance, where we have these meaningful interpersonal relationships, reflecting on our life and finding meaning, and of course this sense of purpose that I think we're all we're all looking for, that maybe we struggle to find.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she was way ahead of her time, I think.
So, according to you, what is covering Ikigai? Is it good life manual? Is it philosophy? What is it? In which category would you put Ikigai, if possible?
I kind of approach it two ways. So as a subject, I first approached it as almost like a life philosophy. But really, Ikigai it's lived experience. So it's experiential by nature. So I think there's this irony to it. So when you look at children, they're so good at Ikigai. They can be in the moment. They can be expressive. That they find joy in small things. They're not worried about the future. They're not worried about the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we get older, we become teenagers and adults, then we we begin to understand how complex life is. And yeah, we start to worry about the future. We start to regret the past. And we kind of move away from the Ikigai experience. But it's only with lived experience do we understand how life is important, or perhaps we gain some understanding of what's important to us. So I think it ties in. It could be a subject for philosophy, even psychology, and it's also a subject of education. I see it as a way to live authentically, where you can essentially, everyone wants to be their true self. Yeah, we want to be our true self. We want to be accepted by others, and in some way we want to express our unique self. And the way to do that is basically through our unique imagination, and give creative expression to that. So it is really hard to define, but in the West, we have this idea, it's this sweet spot, yeah? So that framework, and it's a sweet spot. And if we're doing something that we love and we're good at and the world needs, and we can get paid for it, that's not it. And just on the idea of money, Japanese rarely talk about money. They never talk about making money. So that Venn diagram is really off the mark. I think the best way to think about Ikigai is it's this spectrum. This is what Ken Moggy talks about. It's a spectrum from small things to life-defining goals. But sort of tied to the center of it are your social roles. And all of us have several roles. We might be parents, we might be a partner, you might be a brother or sister, we're a friend. And in each of these roles is this idea of expressing your true self, but also feeling a sense of purpose. So for me, my idea of being a good dad is being a loving, playful, fun dad. And so that's when I'm loving and playful, I feel Ikigai. But if I get angry or something, then I'm not feeling Ikigai. So Ikigai is also tied to living our values. And if we can express our values, we're close to feeling Ikigai. But if we are forced to compromise, or if we're in conflict with our values, then Ikigai will be elusive. It'll be hard to feel. And we need to go back to this idea of feeling Ikigai. So yeah, don't know if that was very helpful, but...
Sure it is, but it's a really complex idea. So we'll try to deep dive into it, but I will take that question from Xavier. which is an English concept that doesn't translate well in French. Sometimes it's related, self-worth is related to self-esteem, but it's a
I
bit
see.
different between the two concepts.
So this is good, and this actually relates to one of Camille's Ikigai needs, a resonance. So the feeling that you're connected, but it really is the feeling that you're needed. Okay. On one of my podcasts, a lady called Chikako Ozawa de Silva, she interviewed college students about what their Ikigai was. And most of them said being needed. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is that we have some significance in our social role. And the way to find that significance is through contribution. So if we're meaningfully impacting the lives of others, and if we're accepted by the people who define us, so by our friends, by our family, by our co-workers, that should equate to our understanding of our self-worth. So, I know my son needs me for money and for computer games at the moment. But when he was younger, he really wanted me to hug him and spend time with him. So perhaps I can look back on those memories and think, wow, my sense and self-worth as a father was probably stronger when he was younger. Our relationships evolved. It's changed. He's becoming a young man. He's not that dependent on me, but I still have this sense of worth that, we're more friends now. And so my relationship is one of mentor and friend. And that's how I get my sense of self-worth in that relationship. Yeah.
I would add some ideas on that same topic, because one of the core topic I'm covering in my work is self-esteem. And self-esteem is the idea I have about my own value. And when my self-esteem is stable, meaning it doesn't move too high or low when I'm having some special circumstances in my life, so I will be able to live my life more easily. And sometimes my self-esteem can be fragile. So when bad things happen, I'm lowering the idea of my own value. And that the value I give to myself is in self-esteem associated to the feeling I have towards myself. So if my value is low, the feelings will be bad. I hate myself, and it will bring me to shame, which is a poison. We need shame to be able to live together, but too much shame is really poison. And what I've discovered by my own work is that by having clarity on what I was calling life intentions, it will help me move into that direction. No, as you mentioned, am I a good father? Not a good father today. So how can I move on tomorrow to be and it gives me, because I believe that I'm doing the right things and I know that direction. We'll speak about Hokosei in a moment. So I believe that there is a link, a direct link, Xavier, between Ikigai and self-worth, because when I have my Ikigai and I know it, knowing that it's a broad spectrum, when I know it and I'm moving toward it, even if sometimes I'm failing, I will believe that I have a better value. So it gives me confidence and the energy to move on. So would you agree on that?
That's a valid point.
So maybe we can cover another topic about Ikigai. According to you, what does Ikigai bring to people? Because people with Ikigai live better than people without Ikigai. What can you say about that?
So I think the first thing we need to understand is it really brings us life satisfaction. Again, in this daily living context. So if we move away from this idea that it's a goal to achieve, so it's not a goal to achieve, it's life satisfaction. And a really good example of this is by Kemp. And so he talks about, that's his book there, sorry. So Ikigai, the little book of Ikigai. I'm sure it's in French. Yeah.
Yeah, I have it. I'm reading it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Very good book.
So he gives this great example of Ikigai being any activity that releases dopamine. So any activity that makes you feel good and that's intrinsically motivating. So it has value simply because it feels good to do it, or doing it is simply worthwhile. And so Ken talks about how he can identify 100 Ikigai sources or Ikigai objects in his day. And so it's waking up, it's having a chocolate and a coffee, it's being able to read the newspaper or his research, it's maybe going for a run, it's observing nature, the beauty of nature, it's having meaningful conversations. Excuse me. And so it's all these little things that accumulate to a lot of life satisfaction. So that's one aspect. Then this other aspect is this idea that your life is moving forward. Yeah, and that's really what Kami and Miyako talks about. That if we have this sense our life is moving forward, that again gives us life satisfaction and it gives us the motivation to live.
Yeah. Just about that, I'm publishing a survey, and I would like to know if our audience has the feeling that they are accomplishing something in their life that is meaningful, and maybe several things that are meaningful. Would be good that you let us know what you think about that. And so we have that misconception about Ikigai in Western countries. You met the guy who is behind that, or the two guys,
Yeah.
Andres Zuzunaga and Mark Quinn. Can you speak
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, both lovely guys. So Andres Zuzunaga, he is a Spanish astrologer, and he teaches astrology at a school he founded. And he's probably one of the most gentle, kindest souls I've ever spoken to. He was very humble, very kind. And so he created that Venn diagram originally in Spanish, and it was called propósito, which means purpose. So in the center was the word propósito, was all in Spanish. So it really was the purpose framework. He shared it on his Facebook page, I think, in 2012 or 2011. And I think it got some likes, it got some shares, and then eventually it was translated to English. And if you Google it as the purpose framework, you will see versions of it in English, and you will find articles as the purpose Venn diagram. Then a few years later, Mark Wynn, he's British, but he lives on an island outside of the UK. Anyway, one day he was watching a TED talk on longevity about the 5 blue zones by Dan Buettner. And in that talk, Dan talks about Okinawa, and he talks about how Okinawa has these group of centenarians. and they have a specific diet, they have a very active lifestyle, they have strong community ties. And then he briefly mentioned the word Ikigai. And he said it's, the reason why you get up in the morning. And so Mark watched this documentary and he thought, wow, what a cool word. And then he thought, wouldn't it be cool to merge? I don't know why, but he just thought, wouldn't it be cool to merge the purpose Venn diagram with Ikigai? And so he actually got a graphic designer to replace the word purpose with Ikigai. He kind of wrote a blog post saying, as a business coach, I've helped many entrepreneurs find their purpose. And this is how I see it in this Venn diagram. And if you're doing something that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, that you can be paid for, then you'll find your Ikigai. So I spoke to Mark as well about this, and he said it was just a cool idea. It took him less than an hour, and it was nothing more than that. It was like a passing thought that, I'm going to make this into a blog post, blang, blang, blang. And that was it. It actually didn't get picked up, I think, for a year, and then it got picked up somehow, and then it went viral. And then he eventually wrote a follow-up blog post sort of explaining, hey, this was just an idea. I simply replaced one word, and that's all it is. But yeah, I'm very thankful to Mark, because it's probably because of him that I'm talking to you guys today. So I have all this gratitude for both Andreas and Mark Wynn.
Yeah. Just to mention, because we had a question from Ellen about the books we are quoting today, Ellen and all, at the end of the meeting, I will share a link to Nick's website, and you will find everything there, and you will even find the podcast with the conversation Nick had with Andres Zuzunaga and Mark Wynn. Zuzunaga. It's difficult to pronounce. So I understand that in Western countries, we like to make things simple, short, really precise. And in Japanese culture, it's way broader. And we have another question from Valerie saying, Ikigai has its own specific words in its original version. Is it relevant to translate it into different languages? And does the meaning remain the same after translation? Could different cultural behaviors affect its original targets? I don't know if it's clear to you.
That's good. So this is really interesting, because Kamiya Miyako, she wrote about that in the first chapter of a book. She said, in Japanese culture, we have this word Ikigai. And because she was a linguist, she basically said, there really is no other way to translate it other than, life meaning or life value or the reason you live. So touching on what you said before, because, Japanese culture is very comfortable with ambiguous and vague concepts that they grow up. Where in the West, we do have this tendency to think, what is it? Define it. Tell me what it is. And we struggle unless we have a clear definition. So, if we try to translate it into various languages, it'd be quite a challenge. But I think there is cultural context. So one example might be, for example, I think in most European cultures, in an Australian culture, we can freely express intimacy. Like, we can be loving, we can do that in public. Whereas in Japan, for example, they really don't express intimacy. And I think intimacy can be one of our most strongest sources of Ikigai. So I think there's cultural context and ikigai or ikigai objects. There can be different ikigai objects or expressions of ikigai culturally. Yeah. But I think that the key takeaway in terms of defining it is let go of defining it. Have a beginner open mind and just try to learn more about it. And if you have access to Japanese, if you've got Japanese friends, try to talk to them about it. For some Japanese, their ikigai is their hobby. For some Japanese, if they're parents, it's their children. For older Japanese who've retired, often it's finding that role again, where they have a meaningful role, so that they retire, they lose that role of working, and so then they go and do volunteer work, or they do something in their local community to have a sense of purpose in that role. So it means different things to different people. And even to Japanese researchers, it means different things. This researcher, or this author, the book reads Ikigai to wa nanika, which means what is Ikigai? Jiko jitsugen no michi, which means the road to self-actualization. He thinks Ikigai is self-actualization, similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so he would say your hobby can't be your Ikigai. That's a sobigai. That's the value of playing. Your job can't be your Ikigai. That's hatarakigai, the value in your work. Whereas Ken Mogi would say, Ikigai is the spectrum of everything in your life that makes it worth meaning. So if tonight you're wanting an absolute answer on Ikigai, I think you need to try and let that go, because it's very hard to give one answer.
Yeah. So I have several questions for you. Last one is from Francine asking, did the Japanese receive a cursus of Ikigai, or is it only in their education, or maybe?
No, so it's not in their education. It's a word they grow up with, and they understand its nuances and its application just from life experience. I watched a documentary once, and it was about a man who managed a cleaning company, and this cleaning company cleans up the apartments of people who've died alone. So in Japan, every 3 hours, I think every hour, 3 men die alone. And often no one knows. The neighbors don't know. And then after 2 weeks, there'll be a really bad smell. And so in Japan now, they have companies specifically for cleaning up people who've died alone. And so I'm watching this documentary, and this man was saying, yeah, it's a challenging job. If we get a phone call, it means someone's died alone, and that's very sad, but it's good for our business. And their business is going in, they clean up the apartment, they contact the family, and they get to sell the furniture. That's how they make money. Anyway, he was saying for him, he has this memory of his mother dying at his home, not his mother, his grandmother dying. And he has this memory of how hard that was for his mother to arrange the funeral, to clean up the house and do all these things. And so he relates his role to that memory. And he actually says in the interview, it's a hard job, but there's Ikigai for me in this job. So imagine cleaning up old blood and maggots, and it'll be a very unpleasant job, but he finds meaning in that job because there's a sense of purpose tied to it. Yeah, so it's something Japanese grow up with, and it's something it's quite personal, and I guess reflective of their way of thinking.
So, but with this example, Nick, you are perhaps answering one of Nadej's questions, asking, is it similar to the why of Simon Sinek, or what the difference rather between the why of Simon Sinek and Ikigai? I don't know if you're familiar with that conference by.
I think I've seen it. I haven't read his book, but I think the why is, I think is that purpose driven? You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that would be the purpose aspect of Ikigai. And again, going back to Cami and Miyako, she talks about, she has almost a whole chapter on purpose, but she makes this distinction of sense of purpose. It's this idea of having a sense of purpose. And she does say, if you want to experience Ikigai at the highest level, you should have some personal mission. But that personal mission can be something quite humble. So if meaning you don't have to be trying to change the world like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever. You know, you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, you could be a sports coach. But within that role, if you have a strong sense of mission, then you're going to feel Ikigai at the highest level. So again, it really ties back to, our role and why our role is meaningful and how we're contributing to others or to our local community or to society.
I remember in Ken Moggy, and by the way, Ken Moggy is a top scientist. He's a neuroscientist, so someone who knows a lot of things about the way we think and others. And he speaks about that guy who started working in restaurant when he was a young kid, and then he decided to open his own sushi restaurant, knowing that in Japan at that time sushi was very cheap food, and it was really simple. And to open a restaurant, you just need a couple of chairs, some knives. And during all his life, he was searching for ways to optimize the way he was doing exactly the same job. It was his ikigai to optimize, and then he became the most famous sushi restaurant worldwide. And
well, that touches on that kodowari concept.
oh yeah,
the paying great attention to the fine details of your work. And not many people do that, but that man Jiro, from the documentary Jiro Loves Sushi, for some reason he has such a strong sense of purpose tied to sushi and serving sushi and giving a great customer experience, that he has incredibly high standards that never end. He's always trying to improve it is interesting, because you think serving fish, that's all he does is really serve raw fish, but he goes to great lengths to when people talk about fish in sushi, it shouldn't be fresh. It shouldn't be caught the day before. They actually have to age it, refrigerate it, and there's all these techniques and even tools that he created in his pursuit of trying to make the best sushi. Have you seen that documentary?
no, not yet. We're just reading it in Ken Moggy's book. I see that time is running so fast, and perhaps because we are living our own ikigai by sharing this with passion. I have another question from Xavier. So it's more a way of life that brings you to live your life intentionally a little back like Hiro Ono and seeing the meaning of it in most of what you do.
Yeah, that could be one way to describe it. It is living with intention, I
Yeah.
think. It's also living with appreciation. It's also living with this idea that you are a part of something bigger than yourself. One interesting aspect, and one book I really recommend by a non-Japanese author is this book by Gordon Matthews, What Makes Life Worth Living. And he talks about two ideas. One is something called ikigai, which is this idea of group. So in Japan, they value harmony, and it's very group focused. And then he talks about jiko jitsugen, which is self-actualization. And he interviewed 52 Japanese and 52 Americans, spending up to 10 hours on each person interviewing about what is their Ikigai. And he asked, the way he framed the questions to Americans was, what's your most important life goal, relationship, religious belief, or aspect of work? So what he found was, it's interesting. So Japanese have this idea of group's important. We're part of a group. We must maintain harmony. But they had this desire to be more individualistic. And for Americans, they value being individualistic and pursuing your goals. But at the same time, they did have this need or desire to have a stronger sense of group. So it was really interesting that he uncovered this idea that our social role in group is important, and also self-actualizing is important beyond our social role. And somehow we seek to transcend and have a greater meaning in our life, but we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to do that, but we all seem to seek it. So this is how broad the subject is. It's talking about daily satisfaction, having a sense of purpose in what we do, but also going beyond that, trying to find or make meaning of our life. But a few more questions. We can have more than one Ikigai. So there's this idea there's only one Ikigai, and that's probably because in the Japanese language, there's no plural forms. So in English, you could say Ikigai or Ikigais, but in Japanese, they only have plural. But Ken talks about having hundreds of Ikigai. I've got many Ikigai. So doing something like this is my Ikigai. My relationship with my wife and my son is my Ikigai. Playing music is my Ikigai. Making new friends, these things.
That's beautiful. And by the way, you mentioned to me the existence of the Ikigai 9, which is a questionnaire about Ikigai, and I translated it in French. So it was translated from Japanese to English and validated in English by scientists. I translated from English to French without validation because I'm not a scientist, and it would take about 2 years to validate it. So, and I will share that with our audience. Probably I will do a conference on Ikigai to capture everything you shared with us and all the other things I know about it in French, which may be valuable for our audience. We can speak for hours about that. I would like to touch another view on Ikigai, which is the one from Shintaro Kono, and the three aspects he sees in Ikigai: Kaiken, Hokosei, and Ibasho. And perhaps starting with Ibasho, because it's maybe what is happening between you and me
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. So this is probably, this is another one of my favorite words. And again, it's this another unique word that I'm sure in French and in English we don't have. So ibasho would translate to, kind of has two meanings. It translates to the place to be. So I is from the verb iru, which means to exist, and basho means place. So the place to exist. But it really means the place where you can be yourself. And it can have a literal meaning. There could be a physical spot. It could be your local cafe, it could be your park where you can relax and feel very comfortable. Or it has this social context where within a group of friends or in a community, you can be your true self, meaning you can be self-authentic. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. And I think that's getting harder for us to do. So it's where you can be at home or where you can be comfortable being who you are. And yeah, Shintaro Kono, Dr. Shintaro Kono, he did research on this. And basically, he found out that it involves self-authenticity. So being self-authentic, and it involved two ideas of experiences. So sharing experiences with others or communicating experiences with others. So if you weren't able to share those experiences, you want to communicate those experiences. And it's done with this idea of echoed values. So you echo, you have the same values, and there's this sense of trust. And so we find our ibasho when we either share experiences or we communicate experiences with people who share the same values. And there's this sense of trust. And we know that the people genuinely care for us. There are no motives. They're people who genuinely care for our well-being, and they'll listen to us. They'll celebrate our good news. And so finding that is an aspect of Ikigai that was important to university students. And it actually became really important to one of my French members of Ikigai tribe, that she could be herself on the webinars and talk about things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe it's partly related to Arugamama, which is acceptance, and the fact to feel accepted by others and to accept others as they are. So there are links between researchers and theories and all this stuff. We don't have time to speak about everything, but can you speak about Hokusei? That
Okay.
sense of directionality, because it also touched me.
Yes, this is really, again, from Dr. Shinto Kono's work, and it really ties in the Ikigai concept. So Hokosei would translate to life directionality. It's where you factor in your past, your present, and your future. And so from your present to your past, you have these links, and he calls them present past linking. And there'd be past experiences that you've had that you can now reflect on, and you can make meaning of them, whether they were positive or maybe at the time they're negative. But now you can go back and make meaning of them. And then there's this idea of your present and future linking, obviously, to things like clear goals and what you hope to experience in the future, or perhaps what you hope to achieve. And again, it's meaning making. He has this point that our goals, they should be meaningful towards our life satisfaction and our sense of purpose. So I think the power of Hokosei, it gives us an opportunity to reflect on our life, and then also it gives us the power to decide on how we wish to engage. And so we can have these cognitive associations with the past and the future. So what did I learn from this? What has my past told me? How can I reevaluate, or how can I reinterpret past experiences? And with behavioral associations, we can even bring back behaviors from our past, old hobbies, relive them. And we can do that also thinking forward, thinking, well, I want this in my future. What behaviors do I need to do? Or how do I need to think? Really good question is, what's important for my Ikigai for the future? That's pretty, I've touched it only
Yeah,
very briefly. It goes
yeah.
a bit deeper than that.
I'd
It
like to.
really relates to also, just quickly, the four valued experiences Shin found. So Shin found in his research, in terms of valued experiences, for the most part, we seek enjoyment, stimulation, comfort, and effortfulness. We want to do things that are effortful, stimulating, comforting, or enjoyable. And that, again, relates to Ikigai.
Yeah, beautiful. Uh, Beautiful. A rapid look at the survey. I did a survey about the feeling of accomplishing, of self-actualization in your life, a meaningful self-actualization, and we have a third of people who believe they're really appreciating their self-actualization, and then one third more or less, and one third not at all, or a little bit. So we will probably have some ideas on how to move on. And then, do you know your Ikigai, knowing that maybe it's your Ikigais? Yes, it's only 15. I believe so, one third, and no, not at all, or not yet, 46%. It's what would be your advice for people who don't know yet their Ikigai?
So remember, it's not a sweet spot. It's not a life goal to achieve. So you don't really find your Ikigai. You uncover your Ikigai. So there are things in your life that make it worthwhile, make it meaningful. Could be hugging your children. It could be making music. It could be helping others. It could be, having a strong sense of purpose in your work. It could be something like you're doing, Pierre, where you're building this community and you're sharing knowledge. So I think you need to ask yourself, what's important to you in a daily context. So
Yeah, to pursue what you are saying, it's also thinking about our lives. Often we live without thinking about our lives, and we can review our life. And in my first book, I'm sharing that quote: "It's never too late to have a happy past." So even if our past was maybe awful, we can revisit it and see it differently and make meaning of it to be happier. So that's the purpose of what we do in thinking about our lives, writing about ourselves, and also what we do in therapies and coaching is about that. Nick, it's already time, and I will leave you the last word. But before that, I'd like to share some next information or information about next. In 2 days, it's in Thursday afternoon, 6:30 p.m. We'll speak about shapership. En français, cette fois-ci, shapership, to shape, c'est donner forme, give a form. And to ship is like in leadership, it's an ability, it's a capacity. So building our capacity to give another form to our future, which really needs it. So it's on Thursday afternoon. If you are not registered yet, please do. You're welcome as usual. It's free of charge, and I'm so happy to share all these ideas. Nick, time to end. What would you add just to finish?
I would like to say that, go back to this idea that the feeling of being needed is really important to us. So I think you can give that gift to someone else. And I would encourage you to tell someone, your partner, your parents, your children, your friends, that you need them. Just let them know that they're important to your life and that you need them. So thank you, Pierre. I need you. So thank you for your help and helping me reach a French-speaking audience, even though we're speaking English.
Yeah. Well, just to say that you are organizing workshops. Sometimes you are doing a cohort of training to become a Ikigai coach, and that's great. I'm just publishing an access to your website. And if you want to move on with your own Ikigai, you can always contact me as part of what I'm doing in my daily life. It's part of my own Ikigai to help you find your Ikigai or Ikigais. So thank you all, and especially thank you, Nick, for all this time together. And see you soon, guys. And Nick will move on.
Thank you.
Second.